Daenerys Targaryen had always heard one name whispered in the dark corners of Essos, and it wasn't Robert Baratheon. It was Eddard Stark. She was only a baby when her father, the Mad King Aerys, was overthrown. She didn't remember the screams in King's Landing or the fire that burned her family's rule to ashes. But stories lived longer than people. And the stories she heard as she grew older painted a picture of betrayal, especially by one man, Ned Stark. Her brother Viserys never forgot to remind her, "He's the reason we were chased out like dogs." "Dany," Viserys would say through gritted teeth. Eddard Stark stood with Robert, killed loyal men, and let our brother Rhaegar's children be slaughtered like animals. That name stayed with her. Eddard Stark, the honorable one, the quiet wolf, the Lord of Winterfell. But to her, he was nothing more than a butcher in a noble man's cloak. So when Daenerys finally crossed the narrow sea, dragons soaring in the skies above her, armies marching at her command, she carried more than ambition in her heart. She carried revenge. She landed in Dragonstone, just like in the true story. Jon Snow was sent to meet her, just like before. But this time, when he spoke of the threat in the north, of the Night King, Daenerys didn't see a noble bastard asking for help. She saw a Stark. Her eyes narrowed on him. "Your father served the usurper. Tell me, Jon Snow, did Ned Stark ever regret tearing my family apart? Did he ever speak of the children who died because of his silence?" Jon didn't know what to say. He had heard nothing but good things about his father: honor, loyalty, justice. But here, in front of the Dragon Queen, those same traits were twisted into sharp knives. "I don't know what he did to your family," Jon said carefully. "But my father was a good man." "A good man?" Daenerys scoffed. "A good man stands for truth." He stood beside Robert Baratheon while the mountain ripped babies from their mother's arms. He knelt to a murderer and called it duty. Her tone wasn't angry, it was cold. Like she had repeated these words in her mind for years, keeping the bitterness alive. Jon tried to defend Ned. "He spared my life. He gave me a home because you were his blood," Daenerys said sharply. "What about mine?" That night she didn't eat. She stood on the balcony of Dragonstone, staring out into the sea, her silver hair blowing in the wind. She could feel Drogon resting behind her, warm and protective. Her dragons were the only family that hadn't been stolen from her. "One day I'll go to Winterfell," she whispered to herself, "and I'll tear the Stark words from its walls. Winter came for my house first, and no one wept for us." Missandei saw the change in her. Tyrion noticed it too. She wasn't just a queen now. She was a Targaryen with a score to settle, and when she learned Jon Snow was not Ned Stark's bastard, but Rhaegar's son, her nephew, it didn't bring her joy. It brought her rage. "He's a Stark and a Targaryen, and he still bows to Winterfell," she said almost in disgust. "He carries their name in his heart. He will never understand what they did to us." Tyrion tried to calm her. "Jon isn't your enemy." "But Ned Stark was," Daenerys snapped. "And Jon was raised by him. The war against the Night King was coming." But in Daenerys's heart, another war was burning, one that had started long ago. In a throne room filled with wildfire and betrayal, the hall in Dragonstone grew colder, though the fire in the hearth crackled strong. Daenerys sat in her high chair, face unreadable. Her eyes followed Jon Snow as he left the war room. Her mind wasn't on the Night King. It was stuck on something deeper, something personal. She turned to Tyrion, her voice calm but sharp. "He says his father was a good man, yet that good man let my brother's wife be raped and killed. He stayed silent when my niece and nephew were butchered. Tell me, Tyrion, how is that honor?" Tyrion rubbed his face, looking tired. "Your Grace, I've known Lord Eddard. He was not a cruel man. He didn't order the killings." "No," she interrupted, "but he did nothing to stop them." "That's worse." There was silence between them. Tyrion spoke again, choosing his words carefully. "You want to rule Westeros, but if you attack the memory of Ned Stark, you attack the North. They loved him. They still do." Daenerys stood, her eyes blazing. "Then they will learn the truth. Love is no shield against justice." The next day, As plans were made to sail north, Daenerys asked Missandei to summon Varys to her chambers. When the spider arrived, she didn't greet him. She simply turned and looked out the window, her voice distant. "You served my father." "I did," Varys said, cautious. "You betrayed him." "I did." "But you hated Robert." "I did." She finally turned to face him. "Did you ever question why men like Eddard Stark were allowed to rule after all the blood they watched spill?" Varys raised a brow. "Stark was no butcher. No, he was worse. He wore the skin of a noble man while turning his back on innocent blood. Rhaegar's children were torn apart by Lannister dogs, and Stark still took Robert's hand. Still let Tywin Lannister live. What does that say about his soul?" Varys looked at her, uncertain of where this was going. "And are you saying Jon Snow is guilty of that?" Daenerys' eyes narrowed. "I'm saying he carries the same sickness, the same blind loyalty. He thinks Ned Stark was a hero. That tells me everything I need to know. Your Grace." Varys paused. "If you're going to win the North, you must be careful. They will not bend to someone who spits on their dead." Daenerys turned her back to him again. "Then perhaps it's time their dead were buried for good." Jon Snow was restless that night. The cold air of Dragonstone didn't bother him. The silence did. Something had shifted in Daenerys. Her warmth, her patience. It was fading. He walked through the corridors, down to the dragon's pit. Drogon was sleeping, but Viserion paced like a restless beast. When Jon stepped closer, the dragon growled low, like it sensed something dark brewing. "I don't understand her," Jon whispered. "She's angry at ghosts." He didn't realize he wasn't alone. Jorah stepped out of the shadows. "She's not angry at ghosts. She's angry at history," Jon turned. "What do you mean?" "Every Targaryen carries fire," Jorah said. "But hers burns with memories. Memories of being hunted, exiled, hated. Your father, Lord Eddard, he didn't start that war, but in her eyes he helped finish it." Jon looked down. "He raised me. I knew his heart." "Then maybe it's time you remind her," Jorah said, "before she forgets her own." But it was too late. Before they could sail north, Daenerys gave an order. "Send a raven to Winterfell," she told Missandei. "I want a record of Eddard Stark's crimes presented to the Northern Lords. His silence, his betrayal, his loyalty to Robert the Usurper." Missandei hesitated. "Your Grace, they will not take kindly." "Let them be angry," Daenerys said coldly. "Let them feel what I've felt for years." The raven flew. In Winterfell, Sansa Stark read the message with trembling hands. Arya snatched it from her, eyes flashing. "She dares insult our father," Arya said, voice sharp like ice. "He died protecting people like her." Sansa stayed calm, but her face was pale. She wants war, not just peace. She wants to rewrite the past. At that moment, something inside the Stark girls shifted too. Jon stood before Daenerys the next morning. "You sent that raven." "Yes," she said without hiding it. "They deserve to know the truth. My father didn't kill your family, no. But he let them die. You weren't there, Daenerys, and neither were you, Jon. But I remember the screams in Viserys' voice. I remember the hunger, the fear, the way people looked at us like we were filth. Your family lived in castles. Mine lived in shadows." The silence was deep. Jon looked at her with pain in his eyes. "I thought we were fighting the same war." Daenerys stepped closer, her face calm, but her words cutting. "We are, but don't expect me to forget what the North did to the South. I may need the North's help, but I do not need their love." And just like that, a crack formed between ice and fire, a quiet warning of the storm to come. By the time Daenerys and her army reached Winterfell, the snow was falling thick across the north. Jon rode ahead, silent. He hadn't spoken much to her in the past few days. The fire in her eyes had turned colder somehow. It wasn't just the winter air. It was something deeper, something broken. When the gates opened and the Unsullied marched into the courtyard, the Northerners watched in silence. Grey Worm's face was hard. The dragons circled above, roaring like thunder, as if to remind everyone who truly ruled the sky. Sansa stood at the steps, eyes locked with Daenerys. She didn't bow. "Welcome to Winterfell," she said flatly. Daenerys dismounted slowly, not breaking eye contact. I'm glad to see you've read my letter. Sansa didn't respond. Arya stepped forward next, hand near her blade, watching every movement like a hawk. She didn't trust Daenerys, not even a little. Jon tried to speak to ease the tension. We're here to fight the Night King. Let's not forget why we stand together. Daenerys looked at him, then back at Sansa. Unity doesn't mean silence, Lord Snow. Or should I say, Aegon Targaryen? Everyone turned. Sansa blinked, confused. Arya narrowed her eyes. The name fell like a stone in water, you told her. Sansa asked Jon. He looked away, ashamed. I had to. Daenerys walked past them all, her voice sharp. He's the last male heir of House Targaryen, yet raised as a Stark. How poetic. Maybe that's why you all expect him to kneel before you. Arya stepped forward now. If you came here to insult our family, go back to your dragons. Jon raised his voice. Enough. But it was too late. The tension had burst. The war hadn't even started, and the alliance was cracking. That night, the great hall was silent as the lords and commanders gathered. They had to make plans for the battle against the dead, but no one looked at each other with trust. They looked like enemies forced to share a table. Tormund sat close to Jon, watching Daenerys with quiet suspicion. Davos muttered something to Tyrion under his breath. Brienne of Tarth kept her hand on her sword hilt. Daenerys stood, her voice calm and commanding. We fight the dead tomorrow. But when this war is over, I will not pretend the North is innocent. House Stark may wear the wolf's face, but it bared its teeth when my family was slaughtered. I will never forget that. Sansa stood too. And I will never forget that your father burned people alive just to hear them scream. The hall went silent. Jon looked between them. This isn't the time for this, but Daenerys didn't back down. It's always been the time. Your father's honor was selective, Jon. He called it duty when he ignored the screams of Rhaenys and Aegon Targaryen as Tywin's men murdered them. He protected me, Jon said quietly. He gave me a home. Then be grateful for the lie, she snapped. But don't confuse mercy for justice. Tyrion stood quickly. We need to focus. The Night King is near. If we fall, none of this will matter, the others agreed. Slowly, the meeting ended and people began to leave. Outside the hall, Jon followed Daenerys into the cold night. Why are you doing this? He asked. Doing what? Pushing them. Turning them against you. She turned to him. I'm not turning them. They've never been with me. They look at me and see a foreign queen with dragons. They love you, Jon, not me. That's not true. It is, she said, and I don't care. You care enough to send that letter. To attack my father's memory, she stepped closer, voice low. Your father's memory is a lie. He wore honor like armor, but he let my family burn. I will not pretend the North was innocent. And what about the South? Jon asked bitterly. Your father burned people for sport. You think I haven't heard the stories? My uncle burned alive for refusing to bend the knee. Daenerys froze. Jon's voice was heavy now. You say you want to break the wheel. But all I see is someone who wants to crush everyone who ever stood on a different spoke. For a moment, the fire in her eyes flickered with something else. Hurt. But it was gone as fast as it came. You're starting to sound like them, she whispered. I'm starting to see who you really are, Jon replied. The next morning, the horns blew. The Night King had arrived, and though the living stood together on the battlefield, Daenerys felt more alone than ever. The North didn't stand with her. They only stood because they had to, above the snow and screams of the coming war. Daenerys mounted Drogon and rose into the sky. But deep inside, her mind wasn't just on the dead, it was on the living, and how many of them would need to fall before she could finally call this land. The night was darker than usual, as the armies of the living lined the snowy plains before Winterfell. A heavy silence fell over them. The cold wind whispered like ghosts, brushing across rows of unsullied Northmen weldlings and knights. Every breath turned to mist. Every heart beat faster. Jon stood at the front beside Daenerys, eyes scanning the horizon. Behind them, Arya adjusted her grip on her blade. Ghost growled low, and Tyrion watched from the battlements, praying under his breath. Daenerys sat atop Drogon, her silver hair whipping in the wind. She looked down at Jon. "This is the real enemy," she said. "Not your sisters. Not your lords. The dead don't argue about honor." Jon didn't answer. He just nodded, though the silence between them said more than words ever could. Then a horn blew. Once. Twice. The third sound came with a gust of ice. And from the shadows beyond the tree line, they came. Thousands of them. Pale, frozen corpses with blue eyes moving like a wave. The dead. The first clash was brutal. The Dothraki charged first, flaming swords lighting up the night. But the light died too fast. Their screams echoed in the dark as the wave of the dead consumed them like a tide. From the sky, Daenerys and Jon dove on their dragons, Drogon and Rhaegal breathing fire, cutting huge paths through the enemy lines. But the dead kept coming. Every corpse that fell was replaced by another. On the ground, Grey Worm led the Unsullied with perfect discipline, forming shield walls and holding the front. But the Northmen behind them were already faltering. Chaos began to break. Arya moved like a shadow, killing silently, but even she was struggling. Brienne and Jaime fought side by side near the gates. Sam nearly tripped over his own sword more than once, but kept fighting. Gendry pulled Sansa to safety when a white almost climbed the walls, and through it all, Daenerys was watching who ran, who stood, who died, and who still looked at her like she didn't belong. As the battle raged, Jon spotted the Night King walking toward the Godswood. He turned Rhaegal mid-air and chased after him. But Daenerys did not follow. She circled above, watching Winterfell burn, and something in her heart cracked wide open. She saw the Stark banner flying high on the battlements. She saw the faces of Northerners who still whispered about her father, who still called her the Mad King's daughter behind her back. She saw Sansa Stark pulling wounded soldiers away from the fire, her people following her every order, and suddenly, the fire in her chest was no longer just rage. It was hate. Why do they follow her so easily? Daenerys thought. Why not me? She turned Drogon sharply, sweeping over the battlements. A few of the soldiers ducked in fear, not from the dead, but from her. She felt it. Good. Drogon roared, fire building in his throat. Tyrion saw it from below, his eyes wide. No, not now. Then Daenerys spotted Arya, cornered by the dead near the courtyard. Drogon dove, blasting fire over the whites. Arya ducked just in time. The flames missed her by inches, but they burned 2 northern soldiers who were trying to protect her. Arya rolled and looked up, and for the first time, she didn't see a savior. She saw fire and death. She saw madness. Daenerys didn't stop. She pulled Drogon higher and circled again, torching another line of whites and a section of the wall with northern archers. One of them fell screaming. The fire didn't care about sides. Sansa watched from the tower, horrified. She's burning us, she whispered. Meanwhile, Jon finally reached the Godswood. The Night King stood near Bran, calm as ever. Jon charged him, blade raised, but the Night King smiled and raised the dead again, all around Winterfell. The corpses began rising, even the freshly dead northern men, and the Unsullied who had fought to the last breath, rose with blue eyes. And now, the army was twice its size. Daenerys saw it happen, but she didn't fly to Jon. She stared down at the reanimated northern corpses, all wearing wolf sigils, all looking like the same people who had cursed her family name. I gave them fire, she muttered. They gave me silence, Drogon roared beneath her, as if answering her thoughts. Then she turned and flew away from the Godswood. Tyrion, watching from below, saw her disappear into the night sky instead of helping Jon. What is she doing? He gasped. She's leaving him, Davos said in disbelief. She's leaving the North to die. And maybe she was, or maybe she had other plans. In the shadows of the sky, Daenerys whispered something only Drogon could hear. Let the North see what Ned Stark's legacy brings. And Winterfell burned. The sky glowed red above Winterfell. Flames curled through the towers like serpents, swallowing stone and snow alike. The wind carried ash instead of snowflakes now. The living screamed. The dead wailed. The dragons roared. From the ground, it was hard to tell where the enemy began or ended. Jon looked up from the godswood and saw the sky on fire. Drogon's shadow swept across the burning walls. His heart dropped. "No," he whispered. No, she wouldn't, but she would. Daenerys was no longer fighting the Night King. She was punishing the North. He turned to Bran, who sat motionless, his eyes distant, watching everything through ravens. "Bran!" Jon shouted. "Tell her to stop!" Bran's voice was calm, eerie. "You can't stop what's already in motion." Jon's stomach twisted. "What do you mean?" "She's been waiting for this her whole life," Bran said, his voice like ice. "To burn the memory of betrayal, the wheel she wants to break. It's rolling over everyone." Jon didn't understand. Or maybe he did, but didn't want to. He turned back to the battlefield knowing he had to reach her. But the dead were everywhere. They poured into the godswood like a flood, and Jon had no choice but to fight. Back in the courtyard, Arya pulled a wounded Sansa into a hidden tunnel. Smoke filled the air, choking them. Above them, fire rained down again. "She's mad," Sansa gasped. "She's burning her own army." Arya wiped the ash from her face, her eyes sharp. "She doesn't care. She's not fighting for us. She's fighting ghosts." They could hear Grey Worm shouting orders nearby, trying to pull unsullied troops away from collapsing walls. Even his soldiers looked uncertain. They didn't know whether to fight the dead or run from their queen's fire. One of the northern soldiers ran past them, screaming, "She's burning the keep!" "She's burning everyone." Sansa clenched her jaw. "If we survive this, the North will never kneel again." Arya looked toward the smoke-filled sky. "If we survive this, she won't." High above it all, Daenerys sat still on Drogon's back. The fire below reflected in her eyes. The cold wind tore through her hair. She looked like a goddess or a demon as she gazed down upon the chaos she'd created. In her mind, she saw more than Winterfell. She saw King's Landing, the Iron Throne, and the ghosts of her family, her father screaming, "Burn them all," her brother's crown of molten gold, her mother dying in blood. All of them victims of mercy, all of them betrayed by men who called themselves honorable. Eddard Stark. The name pulsed in her thoughts like poison. The symbol of everything that had destroyed her house. She spoke softly, almost a whisper. "This is your honor, Lord Stark. Fire and ashes." Drogon roared, shaking the heavens. Jon fought his way through a sea of corpses. Every swing of Longclaw cut through ice and bone, but the dead kept rising. Somewhere, he saw Jorah fall, surrounded by whites, protecting Daenerys' retreat, but she wasn't retreating. She was attacking. Jon wanted to scream her name, but his voice was lost in the storm. Then, out of nowhere, a streak of blue light flashed across the sky, the Night King on Viserion, his undead dragon descending toward Winterfell. The two dragons collided in mid-air. Fire met frost. The sound of it was deafening, like the sky itself was breaking apart. Drogon's flames met the blue fire of Viserion, lighting the clouds like a second sun. Daenerys clung to Drogon's back, screaming commands, but the dragon fought like a beast possessed. They crashed through a tower, scattering burning stones and ice. When Drogon finally steadied, Daenerys saw the Night King below, walking toward the godswood again. "Now," she whispered. "It ends now." She dove, but before she could strike, Jon reached the clearing. He saw her coming, saw the fire building in Drogon's throat, and realized she wasn't aiming for the Night King. She was aiming for the woods, for everything. For everyone, Bran, the Heart Tree, the history of the North. "Daenerys!" Jon shouted, "Stop!" But the roar of Drogon drowned him out. The fire burst forth, a massive wave of flame. The trees ignited instantly. The snow turned to steam. The air burned. Jon threw himself in front of Bran, the flames curling around him. The Valyrian steel of Longclaw glowed red-hot in his hands. When the fire finally faded, Jon was still standing. Half his cloak burned away, his face blackened with soot. He looked up at her, at the woman he'd once thought was his queen, maybe even something more, and saw only madness. She hovered above, eyes wild, her chest heaving. Drogon's wings beat the air like thunder. And then she saw him, alive. For a second something flickered in her face. Regret, pain, love, maybe all of them at once. But it was gone in a heartbeat. She turned Drogon upward again, fleeing into the night, leaving fire and ruin behind her. Winterfell was broken. The walls were gone. The dead still fought, but the living barely held on. And as dawn approached, Jon fell to his knees beside Bran, his voice breaking. "She's lost." Bran's pale eyes turned toward the fading stars. "No," he said softly. "She's found exactly what she was looking for." The snow stopped falling. The wind calmed, and as the first rays of sunlight pierced through the black smoke above Winterfell, the Night King stood face to face with Jon Snow, surrounded by fire and ash. Jon was bruised, bleeding, exhausted, but alive. Longclaw hung heavy in his hand. The corpses around him twitched but didn't rise. The Night King raised his sword slowly, and Jon charged. They clashed once, steel against ice, and the sound echoed across the ruins of Winterfell. From a rooftop nearby, Arya watched silently, blade in hand. Bran sat beneath the heart tree, his eyes distant, lost in visions. He had seen what was coming. Jon's breath came in gasps as he parried blow after blow. The Night King didn't speak. His face held no anger, no fear. He fought like a ghost, silent, ruthless, eternal. Then Arya moved, like a shadow in the smoke. She leapt across the broken stones, blade drawn. The same Valyrian steel dagger Bran had once given her. The Night King turned just in time to catch her mid-air. He grabbed her throat, and for a moment it seemed over, but her hand dropped, just like at the Battle of Winterfell, and the blade slid into his chest. The Night King froze. Cracks of light spread across, his body like spiderwebs. Then he shattered into 1,000 frozen shards, and just like that it was over. The dead collapsed around the battlefield. A new silence fell over Winterfell, one born not of terror, but disbelief. Jon stared at Arya. "You did it." She nodded once, silent, her eyes already scanning the sky. "Where's Daenerys?" He turned slowly toward and saw Drogon circling above like a hawk, smoke still rising from its scales. When Daenerys returned to the ruins of Winterfell, she didn't land. She hovered above the broken courtyard on Drogon's back, looking down at the crowd gathering below. Soldiers and survivors stood among the rubble, northerners, unsullied wildlings, and knights from every house that had fought for the living. Arya and Sansa stood side by side, covered in ash and blood, staring up at her. Jon emerged last, limping, sword still in hand. Bran had been carried from the Godswood, his face calm, untouched by flame. The Queen had returned, but no one cheered, no one clapped. The silence hit harder than any sword. Daenerys looked down at their faces and saw no gratitude, no loyalty, no love, only fear, suspicion, and she hated them for it. Tyrion found her alone later that evening, standing near the crumbled outer wall. Drogon lay sleeping nearby, massive wings curled like shadows. "You should go down," he said gently. "They need to see you. Hear from their queen." Daenerys didn't look at him. "I gave them life, and they stare at me like I'm the enemy. They're afraid," Tyrion said carefully. "You burned their home, some of their people." "They burned mine first," she replied coldly. "Their ancestors, the precious Lord Stark. I just gave them a taste of history." Tyrion said nothing. His silence spoke volumes. She turned to him, voice low. "You think I've gone too far?" "I think you're walking the same path your father did," Tyrion said honestly. "And I don't want to see where it ends." Daenerys stepped closer, her tone icy. "He burned those who opposed him. I burned those who lie to me, who betray me, who pretend to kneel but never bow their hearts." Tyrion's jaw clenched. "You say you want to break the wheel, but you're just remaking it in fire." She leaned in close. "Maybe fire is the only language they understand." That night Jon visited the crypts. The fires had spared it, somehow. The statues of old Stark still stood. Lyanna, Ned, Rickard. He stood before Ned's statue the longest. "I tried to protect her," Jon whispered. "I tried to believe in her." He looked up at his father's face carved in stone. "I still don't know if you were right to lie to me, but I understand why you did." Behind him, Arya's voice came quiet. "She's planning something." Jon didn't turn. I know. She hates us, Jon. Not just the North. Us, you, me. Sansa, Bran. Even if she doesn't say it, you can see it in her eyes. I see it, Jon said. Arya stepped forward. She doesn't want peace. She wants submission, and she'll burn every house in the North until she gets it. Jon's voice cracked. She's not the same woman I followed. She's not the same queen. She never was, Arya said bitterly. You just didn't see it. Jon turned to her. What do we do? Arya's eyes were sharp as a blade. We stop her. Before she makes us all part of her history. At the same time, Daenerys stood on the battlements, looking toward the North. The North remembers, she whispered mockingly. But I'll make them forget. She looked at Missandei beside her. Send word to Grey Worm. Tomorrow we begin cleansing the traitors from the northern houses, quietly, one by one. The wind howled across the ruined walls of Winterfell. Snow fell again, soft and silent, covering the ash that still lingered from the flames Daenerys had unleashed. The Night King was gone. His army had fallen, but the North had never felt colder. Inside the great hall, the atmosphere was tense. Soldiers patched wounds. Lords whispered behind cloaks. The air was thick with fear, not of the dead, but of their supposed savior. Daenerys sat at the head of the table, her eyes scanning every face. Grey Worm stood behind her, hand on his blade. Tyrion sat to her right, but his gaze stayed low. Sansa sat opposite her, lips tight, face unreadable. Arya leaned against the wall, arms crossed, never blinking. Jon entered late, his face lined with guilt and exhaustion. Every step toward that table felt heavier than the last. Daenerys looked at him, but not with affection. With calculation. We survived the long night, she said, breaking the silence. But now we must survive the truth. There are those among us still clinging to the past, still worshipping names like Stark and Baratheon. Her words were subtle, but no one missed the threat. Sansa met her eyes directly. And what would you have us worship, Your Grace? Fire fear. Tension rippled through the room. Even Jon looked down. I would have you honor the future, Daenerys said coldly. And understand that the North is part of my kingdom. That I will not be treated as a guest in land that is mine by blood and conquest. Jon cleared his throat. We fought beside you. We bled with you. But the North, it's proud. You can't expect them to forget everything overnight. I'm not asking, Daenerys said sharply. I am their queen. Arya stepped forward now, her voice calm. No, you're not, all eyes turned. You burned our home, our men, even your own soldiers. You didn't come to save us. You came to conquer us. Daenerys didn't flinch. I saved you all from death, and then made us wish we hadn't survived it, Arya replied. Jon stood between them now. Enough. We need to talk, not fight, but it was too late. The table had split. Later that night, in the quiet of the crypts, Jon met with Sansa, Arya, and Tyrion. She's not stable, Sansa whispered. You saw what she did? I saw, Jon said quietly. Arya leaned against Lyanna Stark's statue. She's planning something worse. I heard Grey Worm give orders. She's going to start rooting out the traitors among the houses. Tyrion nodded. She's already sent riders south to gather support from the Reach. She knows the North won't bend, so she's gathering strength elsewhere. Jon ran a hand through his hair. The weight of the crown he never asked for now pressing on him from all sides. Sansa's voice dropped. Jon, we need you to make a decision. He looked up. About what? You're a Targaryen, she said. But you were raised a Stark. The people love you. They trust you. If you take the crown, she won't be able to stop you. Jon shook his head. You want me to betray her? She already betrayed us, Arya said. She betrayed everything. He turned to Tyrion. And you? You agree? Tyrion hesitated. Then softly, I believed in her. I thought she could be the queen we needed. But now I see what she really is. If you don't stop her, she'll rule by fire until there's nothing left to rule. Jon stared at the cold stone beneath his feet. Ned Stark's words echoed in his mind. The man who passes the sentence should swing the sword. He looked up. Then we do it the right way. Not with poison, not with shadows. We give her a chance to walk away. Sansa frowned. She won't take it. Then the blood is on her hands, Jon said. Not ours, but Daenerys had spies of her own. Varys, silent and calculating, watched from the shadows. He had hoped Jon would rise, hoped he would see the truth. But Varys had also lived too long to leave things to chance. That night, he wrote his final letters, sealed them with wax, and handed them to a quiet boy in the shadows. "If I fail," he whispered, "make sure the realm knows who its true heir is." The next morning, Jon requested a private meeting with Daenerys in the Godswood, away from the soldiers, away from the war council. She arrived draped in red and black, alone, her eyes wary. Jon stood near the heart tree, snow falling softly around him. "I wanted to speak with you." One last time she stepped closer, her voice flat. "One last time? I need to know what kind of queen you want to be." She tilted her head. "The kind who survives. And what about peace? What about mercy?" Her eyes turned hard. "Mercy is for those who deserve it. The North doesn't. Your sisters don't. You don't." He swallowed hard. "Then you leave me no choice." Her voice cracked like ice. "You never had one." The snow fell heavier now, as if the sky itself was mourning what was coming. Jon stood beneath the old gods, the red leaves of the heart tree swaying behind him. His sword was sheathed, his face pale, but his eyes, they were different, hardened, clear. Daenerys stood across from him, her arms folded across her chest, her breath misting in the cold air. She looked like a queen carved from ice and flame, beautiful, untouchable. "Dangerous, you came alone," she said softly. "So did you." They stood in silence, surrounded by quiet trees and older ghosts. "You want to change the world," Jon said finally. "But you want to burn it down first." Daenerys tilted her head. "And what would you do, Jon Snow? Let the lords rise again? Let the North keep its crown, while I beg for scraps in King's Landing?" "I'd have you lead, not rule by fear. I tried that," she said. Her voice trembled, but not from cold. "I crossed the sea with hope. I freed slaves. I offered peace. And what did I get in return? Whispers behind my back, rebellion, poisoned hearts dressed in fur and steel. You burned innocents. They were not innocent. They were loyal to your family, the ones who hunted mine to extinction. They smiled while my people died." Jon stepped closer, voice calm but full of warning. "And you think killing more will fix it? The more you burn, the more enemies you'll have. Then I'll burn them all," she snapped. "Until there's no one left to betray me." He stopped, looked at her. "You're not the breaker of chains anymore." She didn't answer. "You're the Queen of Ash." Daenerys's lip trembled, her eyes filling with a fury that masked something else. Sorrow. "You're just like the rest." "I thought you were different." "I thought you were too," he said, voice cracking. She took a step forward. "I loved you, and I still do," Jon whispered. "But love isn't blind. It sees clearer than fear ever could." Her jaw tightened. She reached for the hilt of her dagger, not in a threatening way, more like instinct. "You don't have to die," Jon said quickly. "But you have to leave. Walk away, take your dragons. Fly east, let Westeros heal, and who would rule?" She scoffed. Jon didn't answer. "Would it be Sansa?" she asked, bitter. "The cold little wolf who hides her claws behind courtesies? Or Arya, who moves like a shadow and smells of blood?" He looked down. "I don't want the throne, but it's in your blood," she shouted. "Rhaegar's son, my family. You're the last man they might actually follow." He nodded slowly. "And that's why you can't stay." She stared at him for a long moment. Then something broke in her. The fight, the fire, the fury, all of it slipped from her face. "I crossed oceans for this," she said. "I lost everyone, and now I lose this too." Jon reached for her hand. "You'll still have a life," he said. "That's more than most ever get." But Daenerys Targaryen had never been one to run. Not from chains, not from fire, and not from destiny. "I won't bend," she said. "I know." They stood there for a long time, both unwilling to speak the final word. Then Arya stepped from the shadows behind a tree. "You won't have to." Daenerys spun, startled, but Arya wasn't holding a blade. She was holding a parchment, a raven's letter, Varys's seal. Daenerys's eyes widened. Arya's voice was quiet, deadly. "You've already lost, Your Grace. The realm knows Jon's name now. It knows who you are. The lords won't follow you, even if you sit the throne." They'll wait, and then they'll rise. You're bluffing, Daenerys said. Though her voice trembled, Arya dropped the scroll at her feet. Read it yourself. Silence. And then Daenerys turned, looked at Jon again. You used me, she said, shaking her head. You used my love. I tried to save it, but it was too late. She stepped back, turned to Drogon in the distance. The dragon stirred as if he felt her pain. Jon looked to Arya. Let her go. But Arya was already walking away. No, she said. Let her burn alone. 3 days later, Daenerys left Westeros, not as queen, not as a conqueror. She flew east with Drogon into the sunrise, vanishing beyond the narrow sea. No one chased her. Jon returned to the north, refused any crown. Arya sailed west. Sansa was crowned queen in the north, and the world, for the first time in a long time, began to heal. Not because of fire, but in spite of it.